Right. Hello, all of our friends in Australia. It's the middle of the night here in Glasgow. And that said, I really wanted to talk to you about employer brand and a couple of aspects of it that I think you're going to find quite interesting. And so I'd like to introduce Will, who's joining me on this session today. Will, could you just give a bit about who you are and what you do, and maybe a bit about your background in employer brand and recruitment marketing?
Sure. So my name is Will Innes. I'm a vice president at Cielo, which is a global RPO organization. But I've been there about 5 years, and I've been a leader in the brand practice. So basically, employer marketing agency for our customers. I've kind of worked in and around employer brands my whole career, which feels like, oh god, especially at this time in the morning when I look terrible. It feels like a long time. So I've worked in agencies. I've run a digital business, but it's always to do with people, how they connect to brands in organizations. I've worked in the UK for a number of years. I've done a lot of work in North America and Asia, and I'm now based in Brisbane, Australia. And I've worked in the Australian for about 6 or 7 years now. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. Cut my teeth in recruitment marketing and print advertisements many years ago, and of course we've seen that transformation right through digital and now all the things that are happening in the space. And it's a really interesting time, especially talking about employer brand. So yeah, really pleased to be here. Share what I know, little snippets anyway.
So you and I have actually had quite a similar kind of career because although I started my career in recruitment as a recruitment consultant, after 3 years I moved into recruitment marketing at that time and worked for an employer branding and recruitment marketing agency. So we're about the same age and we've done a lot of the same kind of things and seen a lot of the same kind of things.
Sure.
So one thing I'm interested before we go on to the main subject is what are the differences between employer branding in the UK and employer branding in Australia? If
Um,
there
I, I,
if there are any.
no, I think that the principles hold true. Um, Employer, well, I mean, maybe this gets into the definition, and some of this is kind of semantics, but there's a lot of language around what is employer branding. But I think the idea of developing that narrative about what it means to work at an organization, what the value proposition is, what the deal is between the two parties, the people in the organization, um, all of that kind of stuff and thinking, I think, is really pretty similar the world over. Things like the drivers will change, but the construct is really similar. Um, the use of channels is really similar. The channels may vary from region to region, but I think that's really similar. I've spotted the same kind of trends happening. The shift towards digital, um, the rise of influencer marketing, the adoption of content marketing to nurture candidates. Um, you know, I think all of it is similar. The variations are there contextual around the culture, the channels, and the maturity curves will look slightly different from region to region. But I think the principles hold really similar. So I think if you understand the nuts and bolts of employer brand, recruitment marketing, candidate engagement, I think those principles hold true fairly consistently, which is why people like me have been able to, travel the world and hopefully add some value wherever you crop up.
Yeah, sure.
Do you see the same? Do you see the same with you guys as you sort of branch out from Glasgow? I know you do some work in the US and things like that. Do you see similarities or much
Yeah,
differences?
yeah, I do. I mean, I do. I have to say, I think that the UK is a very sophisticated market. I think that the Netherlands is a sophisticated market. I think that Australia is a sophisticated market. I think that patches of the USA are very sophisticated and patches of them are absolutely not. So it's really interesting the way that different places have got different levels of credibility in terms of employer branding, recruitment marketing, and channels and content marketing and all these kinds of things. But I think Australia is a pretty smart place. And one
Sure,
of the reasons I
absolutely.
think it's a smart market is because last time I looked at Australia, it had a population of 17 million. The last time I saw the population of Australia, it was 17 million. And a couple of days ago, somebody told me it's like 25 or something like that. So it's I mean, okay, 17 million might have been 15, 20 years ago. I'm not sure, but that was the last time I knew. But it's grown hugely. So the country has had to really brand itself as a great place to go and have a career, because there's been so
Yeah.
many people that have gone and made their life in Australia. And I guess, I mean, from me, certain from my perspective, Neighbours and Home and Away probably were a good part of that. You know, living on the beach, all the fun
You've
and
got your
games.
finger on the pulse then. Uh,
Yeah, I know. I know all about Australia. I know all about
yeah,
Australia.
nailed it.
So, okay, now that I've shown how ignorant I am, let's go on
Let's move
to
on.
what is the topic. So, slightly controversial topic. I hope that a lot of you listening are employer branding people, because I have to find out what you think later. So, the topic is why most people don't care about your employer brand. So I'm just going to give a couple of minutes of my definition of why that is. And Will, I look forward to finding out what you think. So the first thing is about definitions.
Yeah.
You First of all, I don't believe you can create an employer brand. An employer brand is what people think of your organization, and you can't make them think a certain way about your organization. But what you can do is and it's outside of your remit. A lot of what they think of is outside of your remit. Where is your office? That's not something you can control. Who is your CEO? That's not something you can control. The company's culture, probably outside of your control. What is the product that you offer, the service you offer, outside of your control? There's a lot of things that employer branding people actually have no control over whatsoever. And most of those are the things that make people think a particular way about your organization. However, I do believe that there are things you can do to influence people, and that's around the creation of employer branding assets, such as an EVP, such as a career site, such as career stories, those kinds of things. However, most people don't care about them. And the reason for that is because from my experience, LinkedIn tells us 80% of people are not in the market looking for job opportunities. In 2018, we're very, very good at body swerving marketing or call to action messages that don't interest us. So I think that most people are not interested in that. 10% of people, roughly, are dipping their toe in the water. They're doing some base level education, and they're the people who are going to want to look at your employer branding assets and find out what you're saying about yourselves as a place to work. Then there's the final 10%. They're the people who are what I would call in the deep consideration phase. They've either already applied to you or chosen not to, or they may be evaluating more deeply what is it like to work with you and your organization. And some of that is absolutely employer branding, but some of it is deeper than that. Some of it is them taking a look at your Glassdoor profile and what are people saying about working for you, and what scores have you got. Some of it is going and looking at the hiring manager's LinkedIn. Yes, you can probably help them to make them, give them a great kind of LinkedIn type profile. But some of it will be going and look at the hiring manager's Facebook page. They'll be going and evaluating like a real deep dive. What does the coffee taste like? What's your inside leg measurement? And a lot of that's outside of the scope of employer brand. So for why I've called this a quite slightly controversial title of most people don't care about your employer brand is because I believe that the assets that you create are all really aimed at people who are kind of coming into the market and starting to think about, would I like to work for you? So, Will, what do you make of that?
Well, that's a multifaceted thing. If that was an interview question, I'd think you were harsh. um, I think the basis of what you're saying, it kind of broadly true that people generally don't care, but I would caveat that by saying that that's more than likely because your approach is rubbish.
Mhm.
I mean, if so, I mean, I almost posted something on LinkedIn the other day, but I thought, oh, I'm going to just look ridiculous because it looked too much like a rant. But I can say it. I might as well say it now. But research insight for a couple of months, and then you develop a creative proposition around, for a pharmaceutical company or a professional services company, make a difference. And I think that, I mean, that's only one part of it, but I would say that the level of penetration and value that we try and give to candidates before we go in for the conversion, I would say that there's a big difference between people that do it well and people that do it poorly. And I think the basis of your criticism would be pretty accurate for a big chunk of the community, unfortunately, because when done well, I've seen a targeted value prop, even refreshing the creative for, I'm thinking of case studies that we've done through North America, a garbage disposal business that, funnily enough, wasn't attractive to a younger demographic, but actually proper creative positioning that when we tested it, people said, oh, when I first saw that, I thought you were more of a sort of technology type company. I go, okay, well, that's great. So now we're starting to nudge people in the right direction. So I think, some of what you're saying is based on quality. The piece about you can't shape it, you don't control the brand, you don't make the brand. Yes. I think you can, strongly influence it to the point right now. But when I really think about the way my view on branding and how it's changed over the years, I mean, when I first started, I think I believed in the power of advertising. I saw the consumer guys, and it was like the Hegartys and the Ogilvies from years gone by sat on the front of their Ferraris parked on the Strand going, oh, these guys are amazing, they're so influential. Now I just think, what a load of twaddle. That actually employer branding is the concept of employer branding is actually really simple, I think, and we sort of get in the way of it. That to your point, you want to know the inside leg measurement. That's what you want. You want to know, what's it like to work in your organization. And I think people get hung up on the latest graduate campaigns, creating a brand, something really stand out that wins an award sometimes, those kind of things. So actually, do you know what your employer brand 101 is? Take a video camera, take a photo shoot round your office, show me what it's like to work there, show me the hiring manager, show me all of those things. And that, in time, will build towards your employer brand and reputation, which is made up of all sorts of things. So I think you can influence it, but I think there are some real basics you can do. What were some of your other points? So I've started to talk about two of them, but what was
So let's
in terms of the 80% type figure?
Yeah.
I've seen, I mean, you've probably got access to really, really great data on this, so you'll probably trounce all over me, but I do remember there's I can't recall the exact numbers now. My mind's going not too early, but people say, let's say 50% of people won't respond if it's rubbish or if it's not relevant. But half of that would say, if the offer was right, I would be interested. And I've seen it myself, even when I'm trying to hire people here. They're well in a job, they are absolutely smashing it where they are, but for the right job, everyone is open. Everyone, it has a price, or everyone has an opportunity if it's well timed enough. So again, coming back to the kind of quality piece, I think the timing, the quality, the personalization is what's really, really key. And that's the shift in employer brand to kind of one size fits all, although everyone's always said it's not one size fits all. But now we're at completely, we've flipped the telescope round, and now it's completely about me, my world, the right time. And I think employer branding and marketing is about earning the right. You've got to give value, you've got to have credibility, you've got to earn the right to have the conversation, which is, do you want a job here? And let me show you the details. Way back up the funnel, which I think is probably where I agree with you, is you've got to be valuable. You've got to give training skills. You've got to show that your product brand, for example, is really credible, that customers trust you. Then you can start to have the career conversation. Who are the people that then deliver on the corporate promise. What's it like? Who did it? How do we reward them? How do we do it? And then say, and this specific job, now getting down to the nuts and bolts, is this is what we're going to pay you, and these are the people you're going to work with. This might even be the desk you sit at, or this is the plane you're going to get on twice a week to fly here, here, and here. So I think it's that the look of that funnel has changed over the years, and the quality and the bar needs to continue to go up a great deal, which is what people like you are doing, which is why I enjoy talking to you. But that's where we're all trying to get to, I think, as a community of practitioners.
Mm. So, okay, quite a few things to respond to on that.
Yeah.
The first one is, one challenge that people in employer branding have is the fact that the candidate market is more disparate than it ever has been. People have got, there's different reasons. There's more disparate reasons why somebody would or would not choose to apply for a job with your organization. People have got more opportunities than they ever have had to make money in different ways that they want to do it. So the opportunity to make money independently, it's quite easy to go, and it takes like a couple of weeks to get a license as an Uber driver. You can, sell yourself on people per hour or TaskRabbit and these kind of websites quite easily. You can set up an Uber shop, an eBay shop in a matter of just a couple of days. There's a lot of different ways that people can make money today, and so I think the challenge for employer branding is a lot harder than it ever has been as a result of that. There's so many there's a lot more different personas than there maybe were in the past.
Sure.
The other thing about that, I guess, is that people who want to work for an organization, their reasons for wanting to work for that organization are totally changing as well. So Bill Berman tells me that the number one reason that I'm just going to say it, I'm going to say the word millennials, the number one reason that millennials want to look at the next step career opportunities is around, what will that job do for me? What skills will I get from that job? How will that job add value to my resume and my market, my personal marketability in the future? And that's the number one thing that they care about. So it's about job brand as much as it is about employer brand. So the changing world of the workforce, I think, adds a lot of complexity into this whole question.
It does, but there's all sorts of tools to help you manage that conversation. I mean, even, like Video My Job over here in Australia is, really booming. And I think you can do the same on Monster now. But the ability for a hiring manager to post a video about a job, that is really intricate. That is saying, you're the person I'm going to be working with. So I think you can still craft individual or job value propositions. But that said, the core and the glue does, at the top level of this imaginary funnel that I've now painted in my little study, is still holds true in that, and going back to my principle of where stuff's simple, which is, this is the business purpose. This is what our organization is here to do, and a sense of purpose and all of those things. And this is the kind of culture that we're trying to foster, that we believe is going to serve that purpose and give people a rewarding place to be, where they can individually get something out of it. And you've now got, individualized training by people like a LinkedIn, for example. So you can provide the tools in that sort of ecosystem of an organization to really let individuals create the career they want, but within the kind of guardrails. And I think, for me, employer brand is still those guardrails. And to your very first point, you can't control ultimately your brand because it's driven by your people, but you can see how it all hangs together. And I think the tools exist for that. And I said something earlier, which I kind of went, because I hate the word, which was the deal. And I remember, 10 years or so ago, people used to talk about employer brand as the deal. And actually, it was part of your kind of brand guidelines you would develop. This is what you get in return for your, your effort, and discretionary effort is the engagement piece and all that sort of stuff. But that concept of a deal is just completely shattered. The social bonds, allegiances to brand, the erosion of trust. You're right, it's completely changed that. So I think it does really, really change. But I think there's tools and frameworks we can use to do that on an individual basis.
Yeah. So when you talk about the deal, I mean, is that what has become? Is that really what's become EVP?
No, I think it was a big part of it years ago. I don't think that at all now. I never use that language, which is why I cringed slightly when I caught myself saying it, because I just don't think, deals and the idea of a sort of contract. To your point of the millennials, they would go, well, no, because if it's not working, I'm going to leave. So the deal's gone out the window. So no, it's completely shifted. And God, but the idea of a kind of universe has been around in consumer marketing for years, right? The empowered individuals. I remember, I think it was a Vodafone tagline here in Australia, years ago, years, like 10, 15 years ago. And I think now we're seeing more of that here, Well, so the research says. I mean, on a personal basis, do I see that in my day-to-day world? I have to admit, not so much. I do hear about one or two organizations struggling with that, but I haven't physically seen that kind of millennials coming and going. I've also even today I see millennials talking about building their career within an organization if the organization gives them that diversity, ongoing training. You see boomerangs, people coming back, alumni programs. So I don't think millennials are any less loyal, but they're prepared to walk with their feet potentially if they don't get what they want. But so am I. If I don't get what I want and need, I'm going to walk. So I think less of the generations, more of the time in our lives, when we've never had so much access to opportunities. So, I've moved countries, I've traveled, I've brought my family with us, I've put the kids in different schools. That's open to anybody. Really, if you apply yourself in the right way. So, yeah, I think
how many I mean, I don't know anything about your dad, right? But my question is, how many companies, I mean, it depends what your dad did, of course, but how many employers did your dad have? Of course, he could have been in the Royal Navy and had one, but
no. I mean, my family is a kind of interesting one. It is a sort of a bit of an analogy for I suppose how it shaped some of my thinking about. So my dad was a doctor, so no, he did once he was qualified. He did work in one hospital, I suppose, for many years, kind of 20 years or so.
Yeah.
But within that, his role changed, his responsibilities changed, his network will have changed. So yeah, he's not a great example in terms of moving a great deal. And organizations I work with, you do the research and insight, and you'll be, oh, I've been here 30 years. Will we see that in the future? I don't know. You do still see it, at organizations that look after their people, and local organizations. There's a lot of here in Australia. There's quite a distributed network. You've got the major cities, but you've also got lots of communities and hubs where I wouldn't be surprised if people do stay and work at the local hospital or the local business, because that's where their lifestyle and their sort of subculture is, as it were. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting times. And I think what we're seeing more of in places like Australia, I mean, when in North America for Cielo, a lot of our teams are remote. We all look like airline controllers and we sit in our offices at home. I think things like that in markets like Australia, I would imagine would become more prevalent as the cities get more and more built out. You're going to have to look for talent elsewhere. And I think it's going to become more and more normal, and the push towards flexible working, all of those things. So I think there's going to be a natural migration. And you're right, people will have side hustles. You've got lots of people talking about side hustles. You will have people doing other work. I think organizations kind of need to chill out about some of that stuff. And I think when we start as an organization to think about total talent, how people will float in and out, they'll deliver a skill or a project for a discrete period of time, then bump out again. There's a big shift in mindset, operating models and technologies that support that in the next couple of years, in every market, and certainly here in Australia, we'll see a big shift in that, I'm sure.
So you've touched on a subject that I'm really interested in now, which is the subject around retention of relationship, and how organizations need to retain relationships with people because they probably will. So the question about your dad, the reason I asked that question was because
Yeah.
I could have asked about your mum, of course, as well. But my dad worked for he worked for three different companies from graduation to retiring. And I think that a lot of people I know, that's people of that age, people who were maybe born in the 40s and 50s, and have kind of recently retired. That's probably kind of normal that they would have worked for a small number of organizations. I mean, I've worked for five. I worked for four before I started my own business when I was 30. So it's I think people coming back to organizations and working. My son will probably work for the same organization in three different stages during his career. And I think that's going to be more normal. So retention of relationship is something that I think is going to be more important. Now, what does that do to employer branding? It fragments it even further. But something else I just wanted to touch on was the point that you made about a lot of people. So X number of people will not respond to you because they're not interested in opportunities or whatever. But actually, you find that quite a lot of them will if it's the right opportunity that gets to them.
The right way, yeah.
I personally believe everybody is a candidate until they retire. So I don't really believe in this passive versus active thing. I believe in there is behaviors that people display. They're not doing, and they're not looking right now. They're not looking right now. They're tentatively looking just now, or they are deeply, into consideration and having conversations with people. So there are phases, but I'm not sure. I wouldn't split it passive active because I think that's too cut and dried. And I do believe that everybody could have their heads turned. If Elon Musk called me up and asked me to be, said he was going to,
I just don't know.
he was going to. No, if he phoned me up and said he's going to train me to be the next pilot of his rocket going into space, and it's going to take 3 months of training and then I'll be in space, I'm going to say yes. So everybody I think will say yes to something.
But you're right. But I think what's happening in my kind of world is that understanding of what influences is changing. Recruitment marketing 20 years ago was, oh, lucky them, they can have a job with us, and it's you build it and they come. And you still see some of that mentality now, which is never going to work. But you're also saying, you're going straight for the kill, which is apply. So now what we're seeing more and more is the influence of the network, social influence. If I was going to work for a telco in a certain role, and then you look on their Facebook page and they're just getting smashed, with just complaint after complaint, how much does that influence that? And then you go to the careers website and it says, work where customers love you. You know what you're walking into. So understanding influence is really important. And the reason I talk about that is, say, for example, the rise of influence of who your leader's going to be. So we've got a sourcing guru, Balash, at Cielo. And I know that there will be people that join Cielo just to work with Balash.
I agree.
So wouldn't the recruitment marketing approach or the sourcing strategy for us be, how do we leverage our influence there and put him as the main man, or give him content that he can share, or think about, Balash, if we want to hire 20 new sources, could you hold an open day where you give a bit of training and then we can network, get the contact details, anyone's interested, and then we can start giving them more information, get them closer and draw them in towards a conversation with Cielo. So understanding what influence is, and we see that at Cielo, but also our organizations. When we get called in to do a campaign to hire 20 digital people, like we had for a telco, I don't know, year, 18 months or so ago, the campaign wasn't, there was a bit of sort of creative and all the rest of it. Really, the nub of it was to leverage the network of the top developers that were already there. So, we did videos, we did project examples, and we gave the team content that they could share amongst their network. And we filled all the roles. There's no media spend. It was all about network. So I think organizations, when we're thinking about employer branding, increasingly need to think about themselves as a network. and that's not just brand advocacy and those kind of things. It's actually about network influence and the value you give to somebody. That's what makes them, draws them in. And, that in a overall picture is your employer brand. Because some of this is buzzword bingo, right? It's your employer brand is your brand team create this thing and you take it to market. But actually your brand is in, as you've said, the minds of those around you, and they're influenced by what your product's doing, what their friends say about you, the stuff they see on social. So it's a much broader ecosystem. I think you and I have talked about the flight of the bumblebee before.
Yeah,
That's completely right. But
yeah,
you have to have multiple hooks, because
yeah,
to your point, you don't know which hook is going to pull that person in. You can do
yeah,
your research and insight, and you've got a pretty good sense. But after that, you got to have your hooks and things like that.
yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I'll just kind of quickly explain about what that is. So the flight of the bumblebee is the that kind of describes the journey that people go on online when they're just interacting with the web. So bumblebees are very unpredictable. They'll go from flower to flower, and they're unlike most other flying creatures. In that flying creatures, normally their journey is quite predictable, but with a bumblebee, it's absolutely not. And I don't
Like
know.
my daughter.
Yeah. But candidates are absolutely like that, and you don't know what they're going to go to next. So my view is, if they're gonna try and educate themselves about your organization, if they're going to be present in different locations, whether they're educating themselves or they're not, you want to really try and be there and try and give them things that are relevant for what you're expecting they're going to want when they're there. And so this comes
Absolutely.
on to, and this kind of comes on to really my main issue with most employer branding teams is that the work they do is all for people. I think a lot of the work they do is for people who are at a specific stage in their journey, and they're missing out a lot of what you've just been talking about. So you talked about Balash. You talked about Balash as somebody who people would want to come and work at Cielo, to come and work with Balash, right? More than because they got Cielo in their business card, because they work for, with Balash. So I totally agree with that, and I would describe that as being a kind of talent brand, the brand of the individuals. I know we don't want to do the buzzword bingo here, but talent brand to me is the brand of the individuals and the hiring managers. And as people are more visible in the world, and people have the opportunity to have a brand as a leader, I think that is something that organizations need to, employer branding teams need to have more influence over a lot of areas of the kind of assets and communication channels and things like that than they currently do. And I think they're very, very narrowly
Yeah.
focused on
Yeah.
one area of the candidate journey. That's what
Yeah.
I believe.
No, absolutely agree. And it may well not come from here, but it looks like to me it still comes from a place of people would be lucky to work here. So I'll just tell them there's a job
Yeah.
because they can come. And I see heads of TA, forwarding jobs on LinkedIn. I mean, it great. They're getting it out to their network. But I think, that the analogy of in a relationship is like you're going straight for the kill and the kiss,
Yeah. Yeah.
straight for the close. But hang on, you got to warm me up a bit. I don't know if I like you there. And I think we
Yeah.
still need to go through the whole relationship piece a lot deeper. A lot of the work we now do actually is in train. So we do like hiring manager training about personal brand. And I didn't think necessarily that's where I would have been 10 years ago, but training people within an organization about stuff to share.
Yeah.
And I also remember I did an insight group with a publishing company that was, becoming more digital. And they wanted to be seen as more digital. And they had a great story. But I remember the consultant I was working with asked them, so what would it take for you to share some of this on social media? And they all just kind of went, oh, no way. I'm not sharing a job ad. That's just embarrassing. That's just not cool. So I think the understanding of individuals having space to express themselves and their personal brand, is a huge shift.
Yeah.
And that knocks into the conversation about the role of recruiters becoming, marketing, influence, all the rest of it. Is, automate the heck out of all the stuff that's repeat processes and all those things. But you can't automate your relationship with the business and the encouraging of them to share, subject matter expertise. That you've got to have the relationship with someone that trusts you enough to say, can you write me a blog about 250 words about some of the stuff you've been doing right now, and
Yeah.
I'm going to turn that into a people related story. That's the
Yeah.
employer brand bit,
Yeah.
not B2B marketing. It's
Yeah.
tell me about your role in that. How did you feel when you achieved that? I'll put that as the thing. So there's a big shift and a huge opportunity, which is the bit that keeps me excited about employer branding. Is it's going into all of these different areas, much more about relationships and influence. Design and creative is important, and I have seen it shift the dial where brands are all, struggling. But
Yeah.
it's one piece of the puzzle, quite a small piece actually. You've got to get that right, and it can win awards, and it can inspire people to apply for a job or engage with the talent community. But the big area is where you're at, which is got to get people. You've got to think of your brand as a magnet,
Yeah.
and how you draw people towards it. At Cielo, we've got an approach that we've been talking about for 18 months or so called talent magnetism, and that breaks down these different areas of influence. Your reputation, your reach into the market, and the experience you give people. And I think those have radically shifted in the last couple of years. Where to focus your time and effort. So yeah, no, your assumptions around size, seeing everyone as a candidate. I love that. Love that.
Yeah, well, it's just the truth. If Barack Obama phones you up and says, "I want you to come and do something with me," a lot of people they're going to be interested in that. But
Yeah.
the one of the things that you've just kind of outlined though is that your perspective on what employer branding is much broader than almost all the teams that I see and the work that they do, and almost everything that an employer brand that I see coming out of most employer branding teams is basically what features on a career site. And I think that their potential span of influence is much, much broader than that. And I believe that they can actively talk to the total addressable market. And today, a lot of what they do, as I say, is talking to a pretty narrow pool. So when we were talking earlier and you said, well, you weren't in 100% agreement with what I was saying. And I think it seems like the reason for that probably is because your vision on what employer branding does is much broader than what I'm seeing most organizations doing today. So, what that kind of working with hiring managers to help them understand their talent brand and what they can do to the talent magnetism and that kind of thing. That's the sort of thing I'm not seeing employer branding teams really doing at all in general. And then for those people who are like just not in the market looking for opportunities at all, and they just, if Barack Obama phones them, they'd be interested, but otherwise they're not going to be interested really. The things that I believe that, well, I'm going to say it, I know from data, they are interested in skills. They're interested in industry insights. They're interested in things that will help them get ahead in their career. And if those things are authored by, or they are distributed by senior like hiring managers in that organization, then the rub off effect of employer branding is really, really big. So even if that person doesn't, except there's no call to action around come and take a look what it's like to work here, let alone come and take a look at these jobs, there's a big, big impact on the employer brand that, Balazs works there. And that's what he's talking about on stage at Sourcing Summit. He's somebody that I'd like to work with more. And who does he work for? Cielo Talent. Okay, I want to find out more about them. So that talent, exactly. The other thing I wanted to quickly focus on was at the other end of the scale, at the point where somebody's decided, yeah, you look like quite an interesting organization. How do you then tip them into actually going from you look interesting, but I'm not applying yet, to actually applying? And again, I believe the hiring managers come into it at that point. So you gave a couple of examples earlier, or you kind of indicated that there's things that hiring managers can do at that point, at the kind of job advert, like at the job advert point, effectively.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, two things. Maybe before I do that and before I forget, you might say, you might to remind me of the question. Um, I think where employer branders come into it is you still have to think about what's going to make your organization unique or differentiated. Because I agree, the principle of what you're saying, providing skills and all those things and insights, is absolutely right. But I think where the brand bit is to give it the guardrails and sense of direction. Because what I also see is with the adoption of technology, careers websites, TRM, everyone knows it's best practice now to have people stories or whatever it is. And I think they're again in danger of just becoming bland.
Mm.
So the concept of you've got to provide some training or insight, I completely agree. But you've got to then think about what's unique about our organization. And I think that's a layer that's missing because and I think there's that convergence towards one brand, less about employer branding and more about one brand. So your point earlier, you talked about stuff being fragmented. Well, I think the other way of looking at it is actually it's become more consolidated, and you're just going to focus on one brand and the people dimension of it. So I
Yeah.
think in all of this, let's not forget uniqueness, differentiation, and that's the role of people like me. I think it's to fly that flag and think about how organizations differentiate themselves with all of this new technology and best practices coming through. Um, what was your question again? I did forget. I said I would, so I've told myself
Yeah,
I'd forget.
it was to do with you said there's a number of companies that are offering the opportunity for hiring managers to attach
Oh
videos on
yes.
job ads and things like that. I mean, I personally see that as being a real big step forward, because if you can see who you're going to be working with, whether it's the hiring manager doing the video or it's somebody that's actually doing the job itself, then I think that's a really positive thing, and people can picture themselves working with those individuals. Is that a kind of trend that you see developing?
Yeah, yes, but the caveat would be it's horses for courses with all of this. We've got a high volume solution that we're doing right now, and it takes someone from an advert on social media through online assessments on their mobile to registering for a conversation with a hiring manager within a couple of moments.
Yeah.
So there, we're not doing much of this content nurturing and adding value because it's an hourly rate. And we know that we're paying 20% more. And our value proposition is if you take this job, you get 20% off all the clothes in store for the next year. So actually, that's about speed and not losing people at the front of the funnel by
Yeah.
putting a barrier in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
At the other end of the spectrum, if you're hiring, to give my dad's example of a doctor, actually that's about one-on-one contact and influencing their partner to say, if you move here, we're going to look after your family and your other half's going to have this great career trajectory. So I think it's really horses for courses. But if you take the general kind of mid-tranche of a marketing manager for an FMCG organization, yeah, I think the ability to connect, giving them all the information they need, but ultimately it's about then building human connection. We still talk about technology, but I would say probably the killer blow is that's just got to work. It's got to be easy. It's got to be a great experience. It's got to give them what they want. But actually then what that makes time for is the human interaction. So in an RPO environment, we're all about optimization and automation, everything, of course, within an inch of its life. But it's only about the human interaction, really, that it enhances. That's where the gold happens. So I think, yeah, interactions with hiring managers, virtual career events where you're interacting, whatever it is, depending on the role. Absolutely, I see that shift happening, and that's the thing to close it with. Even going in to see the office. I think it was Balash that mentioned to me, he went into the Booking.com office.
Yep.
And it was just insane, like so great. So to your point of the funnel, you start with skills and insight, then you go to the employer brand stuff, then you do the conversion.
Yeah.
Actually, when you've got a sort of knockout punch, like
Yeah. Yeah.
a great hiring leader or just something that's so cool that stands out, actually that can sometimes be enough to be the hook that
Yeah.
then takes people right through, like snakes and ladders, takes them right through to, hey, where do I sign? So
No.
yeah, I see a huge shift, but I also think going back to my point about uniqueness and differentiation, you've got to know what you've got that stands out and is differentiated, and then turn the dial up on that and use it to your advantage for sure.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Something else I just wanted to mention about a point that you made earlier was around the, in like take someone on a date and you go and try and kiss them, and you shouldn't have done at the very beginning.
Hey, I've never done that, by the way.
Actually, the interesting thing though is, so you could compare the kind of candidate experience to like a dating experience, and there will be people, and there will be jobs where they want a Tinder type experience. In
Yeah.
terms of like, I mean, they basically
No,
booking
cool.
booking.com. I want booking.com. I want to work there. I want to just get onto my phone and go swipe right. That's me into the process. And then, 10 seconds later, I've got a note of where to go and when,
Sure.
whereas there will be
Sure.
other people that want the like much more sort of involved eHarmony type of a process, whereby there's like some science in it, and it's
Yeah,
the other end of the spectrum. So
absolutely.
I've been doing a lot of sorry, I've not been judging. I have been doing a lot of interviewing people for the in-house recruitment the in-house recruitment awards in the UK, and I've been interviewing all the finalists within the candidate experience section. And it's just really interesting the way that all of them have gone from, here's one way that everybody applies to work in this company, to one of the big shifts is multiple different ways, multiple platforms. You can apply by playing a game. You can apply by giving your CV. You can apply by filling in an application form. You can apply by submitting a video, and those that are giving people the most flexible ways for them to apply are getting the most, getting more good applications than they have had in the past. And that,
Absolutely.
the candidate experience and employer brand are entirely, intertwined.
Oh, yeah, I think the big part of it. And in fact, if you sort of change the conversation to that language, it kind of makes things easier as well. But you're right, and the virtual reality piece. So you've got people like Cap and Co. and whoever else looking at virtual reality. The military are using that already. That's going to start to cascade through. But yeah, very role specific. Very role specific.
So we're three quarters of an hour in. We're over 3/4 of an hour in now, so we are. It's kind of time's up, unfortunately. I've enjoyed talking with you again. We did a session like this about 6 months ago, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to do another one sometime
Of
in
course.
early 2019, because we still got a lot of things to cover, I think, on this specific subject. I guess my kind of conclusion would be, I still think that my stance, which is that most people don't care about your employer brand, is correct based on what I'm seeing coming out of employer branding teams. But if we think about it in the broader context that you've outlined, which is there are actually loads of other opportunities for employer branding teams to influence people across the board. And incidentally, I entirely agree with that. I've just based the title of this session on what I'm seeing coming out of different teams. So I think that employer branding teams, I think, need to really think about the fact that they can achieve a lot more influence than they're doing with their addressable markets today. Now, one other thing that Will not say, but I will say on his behalf, is I've known Cielo Talent for a number of years. I know quite a few people that work there. Balash is a great example of somebody who is a world class in his field, which is sourcing. There are other world class people in that company. It is a terrific RPO business, and I would absolutely recommend anybody that's considering upping their game. And incidentally, RPO is not about saving money today. RPO is about the added value. It's absolutely about the added value. And the centers of excellence that are within businesses like Cielo Talent are well worth checking out. So I know you wouldn't have done that, but I'll just do a quick advert for Cielo Talent, because I do genuinely.
I've done worse over the years. I've done worse, but no, I appreciate the shout out. Thanks, Adam.
Cool. Okay. So I hope this has been interesting, and you can find me on LinkedIn really easily. You can find me on Twitter, Adam_W_Gordon. Will, how do people make contact with you?
LinkedIn, easy one. Yeah, LinkedIn, easy.
Cool. Will Innes, INNES, really good Scottish name. Shame you don't have the
Yeah,
accent
well,
to match.
my son's called Fraser, so come on, I'm trying.
Wow. Okay. So get him into rugby, and the Scottish Rugby Union will find him, even if he's in Australia. They will find him, repatriate him with a name like
Yeah,
that.
you'll have to rip him out of his green and gold. He's pretty keen.
Okay. Okay. So cool. Thanks again, Will. Good to
Thanks,
see you.
Adam.
And yeah, until next time.
Cheers, dude.